It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. Oh boy. Well, we've got Mercury in Virgo, and this episode, I'm talking to you about how to use that energy to your advantage to get ready for the poop show known as next week. Next week is that big old full moon. That's a partial lunar eclipse. I talk about that a little bit in this episode. I'll certainly be doing a full episode on it next Monday. If you're a patron, I'll have you ready ahead of that. So we'll talk about that in the patron-only podcast. So whether we're going to work together, dropping the kids off to school, taking a walk in the park, doing a hot girl walk, doing a hot guy walk, we're going to be very demure and very cutesy and very mindful and very considerate here on the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. Grab your favorite beverage, come along with me, and let me keep you occupied for, 40 minutes or so. And we'll spend some good time together, and I'll have you ready for the mayhem that is September with Mercury in Virgo. And honestly, this week is the best week to finish getting things done. So if you have paperwork to do, if you have any official business to do it this week. Next week's a shit show. Alrighty, let's get on with the show. I know you don't want to wait, so let's just do this. When I'm talking about the energy and I say, hey, we're all going to be dealing with this, it means we're all going to be dealing with it, okay? It does not mean that things are going to be easier because you have Mercury in Virgo. It doesn't mean it's going to be harder. If there's something crunchy coming up, I'll let you know with your placements, especially in patron-only podcasts, which I will refer to in this podcast. So don't overthink it. All right. When I'm talking without mentioning the astrology, I am literally describing what's happening in the astrology. All right. That's my job as an astrologer. You don't have to know anything about astrology to get something out of this podcast, because it's an astrologer's job to translate what we see in the charts. It's called interpretation. Okay. We interpret the chart. So Mercury in Virgo, starting on the 8th of September, it's going to be there till the 26th when it heads into Libra. And then that's going to be contentious end of the month. So you want to keep tuning in every single week because I keep you up to date. So what's going to happen this week? Honestly, it's probably a pretty productive week for most people, depending on your personal astrology. And that requires a look at your own natal chart. Okay, so I'm not talking about specific placements right now. But in general, this is the time to prepare, to get the paperwork done, to do anything bureaucratic, process-oriented, procedure-oriented. This is the week to get ready for weather. And there's a bunch of you having to get ready for weather because there's some weather brewing on the horizon. That Pisces full moon on the 17th is packing a wallop. Okay, and I think it's going to be intense the weekend before that. So this is the week to get all of your ducks in a row. And I don't know if you've ever tried to get ducks in a row or not, but it can be a challenge. So I would check your pantries. I think it's a good time to get non-perishable foodstuffs, things you can cook from scratch, things you can, just add hot water to as well. Your cup of noodles, etc., for emergency rations, especially if you're on the Gulf Coast. Those storms look like they're becoming actual things. We're going to just see more precipitation with this Mars in Cancer in some weird places even, so Southwest, I'm looking at you. Temperatures are going to be kind of all over the place, and then they're going to dip. They're going to dip when the moon pops into Capricorn, which is later this week. I know you guys want to know about the debates, and I'll tell you my thoughts. I'm not sure. The astrology isn't like debatey. I mean, it kind of is. I'll talk about that in the next segment. But this week, you want to get your stuff in order. Okay, so whatever stuff needs to be ordered, whether it's cleaning up the house, getting ready for fall or spring if you're in the southern hemisphere, preparing for natural events or conflicts in border areas, especially Eastern Europe. Around, again, we're looking at Ukraine, but Poland, if I was on a border near the conflict with Ukraine or even Belarus, I would be putting provisions away and getting ready for potential issues as we move towards 2025. Weather is going to be weird all over the planet, and it's going to continue to be weird all over the planet. I'm going to talk a little bit at the end of the podcast about what I think is going to be happening this week in the headlines. I'm just going to kind of give you a thumbnail sketch. And for the full meal deal, we'll do that in part 2 in the patron only podcast. This podcast is 100% supported by our listeners, and that is done through Patreon. You can check it out in the show notes. If you can't afford to join, that's okay. You can join us for the vibes and the free Patreon, or if you're not sure and you just want to check it out, feel free to do that. If you love what we do, you can join us for $5 a month and be a supporting member. You get a lot of perks for that. You want more perks? You join the higher levels, like the Awake Space magazine tier, which is what I'm going to look at and talk to you a little bit about as we move through this podcast. So what's up on deck this week? Policies, procedures, bylaws, rules of all kinds. We'll probably be starting to hear a little bit more about healthcare when it comes to children and families, especially over the next, more towards the end of the week. It could be to do with school issues. There's a lot going on. Mercury is going to be in a pretty pleasing aspect to Mars in Cancer. So again, this is a really good time to get organized if you do spring or fall cleaning, depending on your hemisphere. We're getting close to the equinox, which will be on the 22nd of this month this year. That's when the sun moves into Libra. And so next week is kind of a busy week astrologically because we have the full moon in Pisces. And remember, the moon is always full when the sun and moon are opposite each other. Okay, so the sun is in Virgo and the moon will be in Pisces. That's what makes it a full moon. The sun is reflecting all of its light on the surface of the moon to our perceptions. And it's going to pack a wallet because Mercury is going to be in opposition to Saturn in Pisces. That'll be fun stuff. And I'll talk about that more in depth next week. But you need to be ready for it this week. So we're doing kind of a cha-cha with the getting ready. So I would make sure you have, especially if you're in Southern California or Nevada, and you're like in the Las Vegas area, if you do a lot of driving through that area, if you're a truck driver, I know we have truck drivers who listen to us, so toot toot to you. I love truck drivers. You have saved my bacon on road trips more than once. If you ever had a crazy little Yaris following you through a storm, that was me years ago, because I would watch your taillights. That's how I could stay on the road. I kept my distance. I never stayed too close. I don't drive unsafely. But it was a trick I learned from my grandpa, who was a fisherman who would follow the big boats in their wake if there was a storm and he was trying to get to port. And I was like, hey, it's a storm and they're bigger than me. I will follow in their wake. So if you're a truck driver, thank you for listening. And I'm glad we can keep you entertained on the road and informed of the weather. The weather is going to be really kicking up, and the equinox is always a time of crazy weather. Spring and autumnal are always the wild weather around there. Speaking of my grandfather, he must be hanging around. He used to tell me when I was a kid, never take your boat out on the water. Never take it out on the water. during the equinox. You keep it moored up because the weather is always unpredictable. A storm will come out of nowhere. So that was my best grandpa imitation. And so we're a week and some change out. Well, we're a little more than that because, again, the equinox happens on the 22nd, but on the 17th, we have the full moon. So we're about, 8 days away. So this week, we're going to want to prepare for anything we can't really think about. Like I can't imagine what would happen. What could I be ready for? So make sure your pantries are restocked and you've got food that isn't past its expiration date. We might hear about some over-the-counter medical supplies or over-the-counter medicines that are recalled this week. I don't think it'll be like prescription meds, but keep your eye out for recalls. I'm not saying this to scare you. Just keep your eye out. It could be something like Tylenol, ibuprofen, that kind of thing. There's probably going to be some interesting traffic as we move closer to the weekend. And this could be because of weather events. So I think we're going to see temperatures be variable this week. I think it can be very, very hot in the early part of the week and then dip down like significantly towards the end of the week. And again, things are just very variable, and it's going to be really, really wet as we move into next week. I think we could see some big rain. Even by the end of this week, we could see bigger than average rain. So there's that with the Mercury in Virgo. And again, this is for everybody. Kind of our attention and our minds are going to be turned to details. They're going to be turned to preparation, planning, process, procedures. In the news, we're probably going to hear more. We might have some leaks of information, especially as Mercury gets closer and closer to the opposition with Saturn, which is going to be more towards the weekend. We could see some leaks about foreign involvement in governments. So foreign interference in government activities. This is global, okay? So I'm not just talking about the United States or our elections. This could be seeing things in a lot of different countries. We could see issues with whistleblowing. We could see issues with investigations. We could hear about court cases having problems because of procedural errors. We could see like somebody didn't file something on the right date at the right time. There could be some real interesting things going on. The debates. The debates. What's going to happen with the debate with Trump and Harris? Well, I'm not even sure he's going to show up. I'm not convinced. But if he does, and he doesn't claim that he has a tummy ache or claims a health crisis, then I'm not sure how well it's going to go. Mercury's in his first house at this point. We'll see. We'll see. I'm not sure. I think he'll babble as usual. But the moon's going to be in his fourth house in Sagittarius. It's not his lunar return till the next day. That is also, it's a fourth house return. And so, it could impact his career. He may have to step down. He may be crying in a corner. I'm not convinced he's going to have a good performance. I just don't see him energized right now at all. I see him still under a great deal of stress. I don't think Judge Marchand's ruling or statement that he was going to sentence him after the election is necessarily good news for Trump at all. So we'll find out about that. Obviously, as we head towards November, but there's so many other things that are going to happen for him. again, October is not his favorite month. So, but what I'm looking at the moment with Mercury in Virgo, as we're looking at rules, processes, and procedures, is will we have a government shutdown right before the elections? So the Republicans have kind of kicked the can down the road when it done stopgap measures in the House, to keep us afloat as a country in the United States. And I don't see us not having an election like some people. I see their potential delays, but I'm wondering, are they going to let it shut down because they think they're going to lose? Because that would be on brand. So that's possible. I think, like I said, I've seen litigiousness. I've seen court cases. Trump will not be president again. He can avoid the inevitable or try to, but it's not going to happen. So I think he might claim a health crisis and not show up for the debate. If he does show up, he's not going to perform well at all. And I think you're going to get to see Kamala in action. It may be a strategy of that team that he does bug out and you don't get to see Harris perform because it benefits her greatly. Her astrology is fine on it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, won't we? I will say, when it comes to that full moon, and I'll talk about that a little more in depth as we go along, but it does not benefit Trump well. It does not help him. So, got that. We've got that. Oh, Laurie, you're not being neutral. Nowhere in the history of astrology did anyone ever say an astrologer had to be neutral. We have to be neutral looking at the astrology so we don't screw up our prediction. But when we give the information, we can be as biased as we want, which is why I came out as a vocal left of center astrologer to counter the QAnoners out in the world back in 2020, because there were a lot of them and they were hardly neutral either. So, don't claim neutrality if you've got it. Remember, I said he was going to win back in 2016 after Bernie got knocked out of the primaries because the end of polls chart showed a populist winning. And there was one person running with a quasi-populist platform at that point, and that was Trump. So there we go. He will not be president again. His astrology does not indicate that he would be president. And I've got a ton of explanatory videos in my Patreon that tell you as much. So look under the political astrology collection if you're a patron, and you can find all the stuff I've said. So yeah. So debate-wise, if he shows up, he doesn't do great, and we'll see if he does. I think it's more going to be like a strategy where they try to avoid her having a good show, because this is not going to be hard for her. She could be sick and, I don't know, no energy, and she'd still be able to debate. She's got Mars and Leo in the 3rd house natally, trying her moon in Aries in the 11th. So she was kind of born to argue. Whether you like her, don't like her, that's beside the point. She's got that placement in a much better position. So there's that. And she's got a Scorpio Mercury. So she's, he has a Cancer Mercury, though. He doesn't forget a lot. So that could be an interesting duel. It'd be like a Cancer, a little crabby, and a Scorpio or Scorpion, having at it, little pinchers going at each other, but she's got a stinger. So I don't know, but no, he'd get real personal, and she'll just kind of stick to the facts and probably laugh at him a lot because he doesn't like to be laughed at. And I think she'd try to get him to display his less than desirable personality traits. But we'll see. We'll see. I get out of readings late on Tuesday, but I will try to get us up and doing a watch party in the Patreon. So I'll do a live stream and we'll see if we can watch the debate on YouTube together or something. It could be fun. We'll see. We'll see if it happens. I'm still not 100% sure he even shows up. So, I mean, he might, but it's not super clear. It's just not super clear. So that's what I've got about that. Why don't we do some patron shout outs and then we'll talk a little more about what I think we're going to see this week and important information to know about Mars and Cancer. I'm going to keep talking about that because this is the next 6 weeks is a setup for what we're going to be dealing with for a lot of 2025, that first part of 2025, up and through April. So, yeah, there's that. So let's do some patron shout outs. The Awake Space Astrology Podcast is 100% supported by listeners like you. And every single episode, I read out the list of the newest patrons. We had a huge growth back in July, and now we've gone back to normal, which is fine. It's a little less overwhelming, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't join as a patron and support our work. We purposely don't take ads because I don't want to have to hear of a company I don't align with on my podcast. I'd be like, what? Why are they there? So I want to thank my patrons for supporting this podcast that keeps us up on the air and it keeps us going every single week. Not to mention all of the patron-only podcasts that I produce. Just something I've noticed that people have been saying, they can't afford all of my podcasts. And I don't think you understand. I teach classes. Classes aren't a podcast. My podcast, this one is listener supported, so you can listen to it for free. So thank a patron. All right. We've got the newest patrons. We've got Laurie. We've got Soledad. We've got Harry Potter. We've got Adriana. We've got EI, we've got Robin, we've got Kristen, we've got Tabitha, we've got Lemon Biscuit, we've got Megan, we've got Brittany, we've got Abigail, Cassandra, CW, Lauren, Meredith, Elizabeth, Courtney, Christy, Jacqueline, Isaac, Kaylin, Joy, Loretta, Letha, Kay, Mama Soares, Christina, Fiona, Mel, Hope, Michelle, D, Nicole, 914, Amy, Tanya, Mariana, Chandra, Manuela, Fire Breather, Mary, Katie, Jessica, Ashley, Kimberly, Megan, Danielle, Katie, Renee, Tanika, Jackie, Spencer Somehow Knows, Desiree, Deanna, Jen V, Audrey, Kathy, Anna, Carrie, Kristen, Stephanie, Ashley, DS Check, Aaron, Carmen, Hope, Lee, Skylar, Jessica, Jacqueline, Christopher, Jessica, Silver Sphinx, GI, Jinshi, Olivia, Alejandro, Photohead 337, Nikki, Aislinn, Larissa, Camilla, Marlo, Rachel, Wage Peace, Carrie, What Up Though, Liz, Ariel, Jasmine, Jason, Kevin, Paige, Lisa, Jenny, Katie, Ocean Man, Heather, Kim, Vivian, Summer, Lou, Helen, Lexi, Mickey, Ostia, Katie, Bianca, Marquesa, Nora, Stephanie, Grace, Kavi, Lily, Tiffany, J Crest, Jay, and Lacey. Thank you guys so much for being patrons. Without you, there is no podcast. And I invite other people to join. We've got a pretty good group. You can join in the Patreon chat. We've got a ton of resources. Depending on your tier, there's video classes. There's so much. And I'm going to put my YouTube playlist in the show notes as well for the beginning astrology tutorials so that you can start understanding what I'm talking about when I talk about various astrological things, including your own astrology chart. It's a good way to get started, and that's 100% free. Thank a patron. All right, so let's take a look at how else we can use the energy that we've got going, because we're moving towards a very impactful full moon on the 17th of September in the evening. Okay, that's when the moon will be full, is in the evening. So if you're outside of the US, then it's the 18th, okay? And that would be in the morning or afternoon for you. So Mercury is going to be opposite Saturn, and I think that's going to make for some big transportation issues. We could see problems with bridges. We could see issues with freeways, roads that cross borders. We could see issues with border crossings, paperwork, systems for immigration or customs could be glitching. We could see, border disputes. We could see issues with oil tankers. We could see issues with large ships and having issues with entry to ports. We could see a bunch of stuff. I think what has me a little nervous about Mercury being in opposition to Saturn is that before the full moon in Pisces, we will have the moon in Aquarius, which is going to be in square, not opposition. It's square Uranus in Taurus. And we've seen a lot of seismic activity when the moon is in Aquarius, squaring off with Uranus and Taurus. With Mercury in opposition to Saturn, this could be some shake, rattle, and roll. We also have Pluto in a sextile with Uranus. So this is telling me that if there is seismic activity, wherever it is, could be very sizable and do infrastructure damage. Is it a guarantee? No, it's not. I could be wrong. Okay. I want you guys to understand that when I'm talking about a prediction, it means I'm very certain that there is a higher than average chance that something like this could happen. Okay. There's more than one option of what could happen. But when I look at seismic activity, I'm saying if there is some, it could be sizable, and it could be, above a 6.0 up to about a 7.5 maybe. The most likely areas that I can see that I've been looking at in the charts is most likely Southern California on the Nevada border. Okay, so it could be in the San Bernardino Mountains, and that could rattle Arizona as well as Nevada. It could be further in towards Nevada than on the east side of the San Bernardino Mountains. I'm a little concerned about the 15, okay, which is the road into Las Vegas. It could mess up that road, but it could be more like the 40, so I don't think it's going to be up as high as Reno. I know Reno keeps asking, but I don't see anything sizable in that direction, meaning nothing over a 6.0. When I say sizable, I'm talking about a 6.0 or higher. 5.0, you're really going to feel it. It's not going to do the infrastructure damage in the same way, at least to my knowledge. It could also be in Mexico, though. It could be in northwest Mexico near the U.S. border. Okay. And that's going to rattle any of the border area on either side. Natural events don't care about country borders. The earth doesn't see boundaries. Okay. The country boundaries are political and made up. All right. So there's that. So it'd be a good time to get ready this week if you live in those areas or areas that could be affected. Other things to understand. If a major freeway is impacted, that will have issues with supply chain. Trucks won't be able to get through. Rail lines might be disrupted. So depends on what's going on where. So would you be able to feel it in LA? No, probably. It's going to be, if it happens, it could be a sizable quake. So just be aware of that. I've been looking at this for about a year and I've been seeing it in chart after chart after chart. So that's where I think things are most likely, but any seismic area, any active fault line, it is entirely possible. So you might want to be keeping an eye out wherever it is, like Alaska, Japan, Philippines, Indonesia, New Zealand. Those are all places to keep your eye out and be aware. Do I think it's 100%? No, I don't. I'm hoping I'm wrong. When would this possibly happen? I think it is much more likely sometime around the 15th, 16th, but it could happen anywhere from then in through the 19th. So full moons tend to be a release. I think with the full moon, if we see more seismic activity, so let's say we have a larger one inland in California, we could also see something off the Oregon or Washington coast during the Pisces full moon. That might be up towards Alaska, okay, or up more towards British Columbia. So that's something to keep an eye on. So again, just be as prepared as you can be, because we can't prepare for everything, but we can be as prepared as we can be. That's why I give you warning. These things, I don't know about you. I would have really loved a warning back in 2001 in the Nisqually quake up in Washington. I was a good astrologer. No, I wasn't predicting earthquakes back then. It was intimidating. They're hard to predict. So that's some of the biggest stuff that I'm seeing, but it could also be huge storms. We could see like things that take out piers or have issues in marinas. This might be like the Gulf Coast, but, or Ireland, England, anything in the Channel, the English Channel, Netherlands, Belgium, for this full moon in the morning of the 18th for you. So that could be it. Southern Hemisphere, it might be more like the 15th, 16th. You see some issues. This could be winds. This could be variable temperatures. This could be electrical storms. I think on the 15th, 16th is possible. But yeah, so this full moon is a partial eclipse, a partial lunar. It is not visible anywhere except the Pacific Ocean, Chile, and Argentina, which has me wonder if Chile and Argentina might see some either maybe an offshore quake. I think this could also have issues with sea level rise in the next 6 months. We could see some issues with ocean currents, and we could see some storms start to whip up. Most likely, I'm just going to say like North Sea, North Atlantic, we could see some stuff as well. Antarctica, we might hear about it being too warm. There might be a faster ice melt than anticipated. It could be that some storms are whipping up out of their polar vortex that are a little bit interesting. I don't know. I don't know a lot about the weather down there, and I don't watch the news. So that's what I'm seeing that people need to get ready for. Politically, I think things are going to get interesting. You want to make sure you're checking if your voter registration is still active and correct. You want to make sure, and this is anywhere there's voting. It's not just the United States. There are many elections happening around the world this year. You want to understand the local policies, procedures, and rules. I've been saying for a long time, you need to think more like the French Resistance than the French Revolution with this energy. I am not going to back down on that. Every country has their own system of participation. Some countries, there isn't a lot of citizen or subject participation because not everyone is a citizen of their country. Some people are subjects. Okay. So often, if you're a subject in a kingdom, you don't have as much participatory rights. And that's just how that system works. I'm not going to judge it one way or the other. That's just how that country's systems worked. In a country where you're considered a citizen, you have some rights and privileges of participation. But to what extent? You have to understand the rules. So this is the time to get out bylaws for organizations. This is the time to understand how local commissions work, if there's public input, what kind of rules there are for speaking and putting yourself forward. That's something that you need to be advised of. I've been saying that we're going to see the hard right kind of push against any kind of progress. They're sure they're going to win this. And this is global. Autocrats everywhere are feeling like they have to because they know they're under threat. And it's important for people who don't want that to happen to be as involved as they can be in whatever way they can be. If you're not certain that you can be involved, then you need to look at subtle resistance versus overt resistance, because in general, when we have a revolution, it just ends up being the same thing with a different name. So you want to think more about like, what's the objective? What do you want for people? How can you be involved? What can you do to stay, for your family to be safe and secure? And it just depends on the area you live in and your personal circumstances on that one, but just be as prepared as you can be. In the United States, I think we're going to hear more about espionage. I think we're going to hear about some leaked information, which is kind of interesting. Let's see. I'll do a little bit from the magazine. Let's see here. Oh my gosh. Speaking of resistance, it took me forever to get the magazine done because I was writing my metaphysical article on identifying resistance. So what I do, I had a bunch of resistance patterns. So this is what I wrote for the month of September. Okay. So, and the photo on the article page, I cracked up when I found it because it's like this old guy peeking through his fingers like, oh no, what's next? So it's complicated. Well, at least Mercury is direct. We got to look at the bright side, right? September starts with a bang, literally. Uranus stations for retrograde motion, and later that day, Pluto slides back into Capricorn for its final encore performance. The energy will feel surreal, as if we're both in and out of time. Just when you thought things couldn't get any weirder, the weird will increase. And I'm not just talking about the orange one, though he certainly isn't going to enjoy this month. Everything will seem strange and out of step, like a poorly dubbed movie where the mouths are moving, but the speech is slightly off. I'm going to warn you right now. The presidential race is almost a distraction from the big issues. I know that's not a popular view, but it's the truth. There are so many more races to consider, and with all the talk about saving democracy, the talking heads are forgetting to mention all of the gears in the machine that make it work. Sure, the crankshaft makes the engine work, but if the other parts aren't functional, the crankshaft isn't going to make anything else happen. So there are state races to consider. There are county and city races, and this could be provincial, however your country describes things. And yes, there are other federal races like congressional seats. As compelling as the political rhetoric will be throughout September, don't let yourself get caught up in the spin. There just won't be the political drama in the United States either. We're going to see some wild moments in all countries who tout themselves as democracies. We could see more elections called and or votes of no confidence. We could see a few leaders be deposed, removed, retired, or be voted out. The final strike on the gong of massive systemic change is being rung as Pluto enters Capricorn one last time. Though brief, it's guaranteed to pack a wallop. Don't expect the Jenga tower to fall quickly, though. This is an evolutionary process, and the blocks will tumble in slow motion over time. We might see a couple of billionaires end up in hot water or fall even further from grace, changes in leadership, or even the death of a prominent world figure, including politicians, religious figures, or those who have held a seat of power. Though momentum for enduring change builds up through the month of September, setting the stage for an October to remember. Get your harnesses and helmets on nice and snug. It's going to be a very interesting month. So that's what I wrote about September in the Awake Space Astrology magazine. That was my thoughts for the month. It's gonna be a little nuts. I'm not gonna lie. It's just a little wild. I back that up with this article called The Complexity of September 2024. September is a complicated month. Uranus stationed retrograde on the 1st, Pluto re-entered Capricorn on the 1st, and Mars slid into Cancer on the 4th. That's a lot of change in one day, or even a week. Then we have the Jupiter-Saturn square still ongoing, which causes a lot of twixt in between energy. Like we sort of feel optimistic, but stuff still keeps showing up to make us question our optimism. As always, hope is essential. That's how we generate the future conditions we want to live in long into the future. But y'all are impatient. You want the quick fix now. You want things to resolve overnight or within 39 minutes of the start of the episode. And honey, life just doesn't work that way. The problems we're facing are far older than you've been alive, and we've been seeing resolution happen in real time. It's just a long process, and as simple as the solutions seem to be, there are those that will complicate the issues. We'll see a lot of that in September. The complications are what bring us to the crisis point we face in October, where the changes must be made. They are unavoidable. When I say we, I mean humanity in general. We'll see the need for dealing with climate change. We'll see the need for better diplomacy. We'll see the need to rework our economies. And solutions are long game line items. And that's the first page of that article, and I'll leave that there. I'll read all those articles out for patrons at the magazine level and up. You guys get that recording usually by the third week of the month. We'll see what I get done this week. I'm catching up on some stuff. So let's see. I'm just going to give you a little bit of what I think is going to happen Monday and Tuesday. Actually, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, a little bit of Wednesday, because the moon, the transit moon in Sagittarius will be there from the 9th through the 11th. We're going to see forest fires, lightning strikes. That could be bushfires as well. We could see a lot of arsons. Fires go out of control because of wind. We could see tropical storms and hurricanes, typhoons, and issues with warming seas. Tensions erupt in the Straits of Taiwan, territorial waters of the Philippines, potentially. We could see issues with Iran, could be leadership and or actions taken with drones or sea-to-air missiles. We could see international disputes increase, truces and ceasefires fail, war breaks out in regions with current tensions. United Nations, NATO, EU, and other international organizations might have a crisis, and that could be WHO, aid agencies. It could also be something like G7 countries, or, World Bank, any kind of international organization or NGO even. Supreme Court justices in the headlines are high courts in other countries. So like the highest courts or justices within there. Political violence, nationalism, right-wing and left-wing clashes. This is global. We could see riots, protests, and mass violence. Donald Trump gets bad news, stressed, or has health issue. Pope's health or other religious leaders' health is in the news. Religious leaders and organizations are under fires. Maritime incidents, accidents, and issues in ports. We could see a big international incident. It involves either people from many countries or involves a border crossing. Accidents with missiles and or satellite launches, sizable earthquake of a 6.0 or higher in the Pacific Rim. This is probably offshore. Other regions could see up to a 5.8. Massive storm or issues to do with a massive storm could be a hurricane or something that starts at sea and goes through more than one country. And just a reminder that the transits are global. Accidents and political upheaval can also be big storms or natural events and vice versa. The rest of what's happening this week, I'll read through in the patron only podcast. It's going to be an interesting week. I think the next couple of days, we're going to see a lot of volatility. We could even see some interesting court cases come up. We could see more issues with things to do with families, family values, what we believe is important. We could see people wanting to protect their families. We could see people claiming self-defense. We could see more stories like the woman in Florida whose husband was a police officer and was taking her hair, I kid you not, taking her hair and planting it at armed robbery scenes, trying to frame her for armed robbery. She wanted a divorce, and that was his response. And so she figured if she was going to go to jail, she was going to go to jail for something she did. And she pulled a Lorena Bobbitt. Yes. And I guess he's in the hospital. He's quite scalped or sculpted. Well, it wouldn't be scalped, but sculpted. Scalpel. Anyway, manscaped to the extreme. Yeah. But she figured she wasn't ever going to get a fair shake in court or be able to prove herself innocent because she was up against a police officer who was planting her DNA in places. So when they took her to book her into jail, she got a standing ovation by the other prisoners. I said there might be more violence by females or people who identify as female or violence against women with Mars in Cancer. I wrote an article about Mars in Cancer. I'm not going to read it here, but I will read it on the patron only magazine podcast that I do. So for the magazine subscribers and I think you'll find that very interesting if you haven't already read the article. But I go into why our social cultural bias has not helped our interpretations very well, because there's a lot of astrologers out there going, oh, it's just Mars in Cancer, it's weak. There ain't nothing weak about Cancer energy. And Mars doesn't always have to be acts of aggression and war. We do see that at the mundane level, but not always. Not always. If we were operating off of absolutely traditional interpretations, we would have seen, and they were correct, then we would have seen a lot more expansion in the Middle East, and honestly, the fact it hasn't blown up into the entire region shows that there's been an evolved understanding of the tactics of one side and another side. And so there we go. Mars can just be action. It's how we take action. And so the issues are going to be around homes, home protection, family. We could see violent weather, especially when it comes to precipitation, and high tides and things like that. So if you live on the coast, watch out for the tides, especially around this full moon that comes up on the 17th / 18th. If you live in a coastal area globally, The high tides should be significant. It's a supermoon. So just being a supermoon makes for significant tides. It's in Pisces. And that's going to egg that water on. So, yeah, there's that. That's what we're up against. So I'm going to love you and leave you guys a little early this week because I'm really tired and I've done like 25 takes. And I'll get the patron-only podcast out probably like Tuesday or Wednesday. I know. I've been like, I got a ton of information out to you. I finally got my energy back. I was really, really struggling through July and August, just energy wise. No, I wasn't well, but I wasn't sick, if that makes sense. I was recovering from burnout, and it was significant. It was physical. And so I'm gonna just cut this one short, and I will have you ready for that full moon, I promise, in Patreon for sure. But let's see. The 16th is next Monday. So, and that full moon isn't until Wednesday or Tuesday, the 17th, late at night or early Wednesday morning. So I'll have you ready for it next week's podcast. So you'll just have to tune in to the patron-only podcast that I'm putting out this week. And I'll get you ready ahead of time. Alrighty. I want to thank all of you for listening, and I appreciate all of your support. And don't forget to thank a patron.